the natural body's functions, the brain itself will slowly take to this plasma and make it a natural part of itself. In other words, it'll regrow that part of its own brain. Pretty amazing, huh? Well, Billy asked if they had this ability, then they could probably just keep creating new brains all the time and live forever. Is that true? And he says, before Quetzal can even answer that, Billy answers it himself. He says, no, I can see why that would be wrong. That wouldn't be possible, because that, of course, would interfere with the natural ability of creation to evolve through sleep periods. That at some point, the spirit is going to have to rest. And Quetzal agrees and says that's true. If you technically keep pushing the body, which you can through longer and longer life duration, at some point the material part of the body will give up, and the guy will become an imbecile, and the spiritual self would just go stagnant, and it would force itself into sleep. You can only push it so far. Billy had a question about the Sonians. Quetzal said he really didn't know too much about them. They were from the Tao universe. Their average lifespan was about 2,360 years. They were 175 centimeters tall. They, unlike us, they had a much larger head, about 50% larger than us, with long skulls. And they were about 4,000 years in advance of the Pleiadians, technically. They had evolved to the point where their mental abilities were so powerful that they no longer used flight machines to move around the universe, that they were actually able to transmit themselves just by the force of their own mind from the Tao universe to Era. So these are some pretty developed guys. At the end of this contact, Billy wants to know if the 30-kilometer limit on his travels is still in force that Ptah had set on him, and Quetzal says, no, it's lifted, but you want to be very careful. There was a question about the home planets of the Pleiades. Billy wanted to know, he says, do you actually live in the Pleiades that we look at? Semyasi had mentioned something about having to make a dimensional shift. And Quetzal said, I'm surprised that you picked up on that. We didn't want to tell you about that until 1979. But he says, yes, the Pleiades that we live in are actually in a parallel dimension to the Pleiades that you look at in the sky. The Pleiades that you see in the sky are not suitable for life for us, so we can't live there. The parallel world that we live in is a solid world just like yours, because Billy was concerned that they may exist in some sort of other etheric state on their own planet. But he says, no, we are we are material beings just like you, living in flesh and blood, and the parallel dimension that we live in is also solid just like yours. Quetzal also commented to Billy that there are other forms of life in other dimensions. For instance, on planets where there is flora and fauna, that there are also elemental beings. These are beings who exist in a higher vibrational level than we do. They make no effort to contact us. Their role within nature is that they are connected somehow to the flora and the fauna of a planet. There is no way to acoustically talk to them or telepathically reach them, but it is possible some people do perceive them, but we can't really communicate with them. The 99th contact comes up on Wednesday, January 4th in 78, so we're almost in 3 years here now. And this is a rather sad one because Quetzal has some bad news, that he and the others have decided that they've been very disturbed by all the problems in Billy's group, and they're deliberating very seriously about stopping the contacts. It just doesn't seem to serve their interest any longer, and they're very disappointed that the group members are unable to really act responsibly with all the information and help Billy. So they say they've come to the conclusion that the people of Earth are just having too much trouble understanding the truth. And so maybe it's a good time to actually stop the contacts. Quetzal says maybe it's possible they should only continue having contacts for those who believe in or who are very sincere. But then he comments to Billy, if they stop the contacts, it would be a very bad thing for the planet Earth, because if the contacts stopped and the mission stops of developing spiritual guidance leaders with the members of the group, then he fears the prophecies of the future would probably come true, which could mean a very dark time for the planet Earth. And this would really be a shame, because if the members of the group would just understand how important this was, and if they could just open their minds up to the truth, then all this could really be avoided. Well, Billy pleads for those who have been sincere. He understands that many people have difficulty, And for some people, it's very difficult for them to understand all this information and learn it as quickly, perhaps, as the Pleiadians are expecting. And he starts to get a little frustrated and upset, and he's coming on to Quetzal about, you guys are very pushy. You have a lot of nerve coming down here demanding this and demanding that and pushing us so hard. We're doing the best that we can. And the people are working very hard. They're making a very good effort. And it was your forefathers to begin with that caused all of these problems, and you should make a little bit more effort to try to, help us with our difficulties. You need to develop patience, and possibly you just don't understand humanity as well as you really think you do. And he gets rather upset, and he says he's had enough, and he just wants to go home. He doesn't want to talk to Quetzal anymore. He just wants to go. And he makes a very valid effort. Actually, in the contact notes, there's quite a speech he gives on the defense on behalf of humanity and how we really do have to learn our own and don't be so impatient with us. Well, Quetzal understands a little bit. But Billy doesn't want to talk anymore. He says, "Let me out of here. I will feel better when I don't have to see you anymore." And immediately goes to the hatch and just leaves the ship. Well, their next contact, which is the 100th contact, Friday, January 6th, Quetzal apologizes. He was very moved by the things that Billy said about Earth humanity, and he apologizes. He doesn't actually apologize. He just says, "We realize that we don't understand as much about you as we thought we did. For us, it is a continual learning process also. Please remember, we're not superhuman. We also make mistakes," and they kind of, make up a little bit, and he decides that the contacts will go on, but that Quetzal is still very upset by the action of the group, as well as Ptah and the others are, because there are so many difficulties, egos, and jealousies springing up in the group that really there is no progress as far as the mission is going on, and it's turning out to be just more and more difficult for Billy to hold things together all the time, as well as it's taking a very terrible toll on his health. Well, Billy returns home and tells all the members of the group, that they're going to have to straighten up, and he's explained to him all about the difficulties, but it doesn't seem to be working. The intrigues and the backstabbing are getting pretty bad around the house. Just a week or so earlier, it's worth noting, on New Year's Eve, there was a little celebration at the center there, and many of the people were there, about 20 of them. And they were all kind of, having a drink of wine and having a good time and having an interesting evening. Billy doesn't drink wine. But Billy was being pressed to show some of his spiritual abilities to the group. And it was kind of done in good faith. Good fun. They'd heard stories about Billy being able to do things with his mind, and they wanted to see something. Because reportedly, when they were moving into the home, on one particular occasion, Billy was able, with his own spiritual abilities, to actually lift a very heavy oven that was too heavy for 4 men to pick up. He moved it onto the truck with the force of his own mind. Well, they'd heard about this, but none of them had really seen anything. So they were kind of pushing Billy to do something. So what ensued was, and Billy seemed to be a little embarrassed by it, and perhaps maybe his feelings were a little bit hurt somehow. He has some strange attitudes sometimes. But at any rate, he was pushed into it, and he started accepting coins from people and performing, I guess you call, like parlor tricks. And he caused a couple of coins to get red hot. He burnt one in his hand. He was able to take a spoon and not only bend it, but have a spoon almost melt and fly across the table. So he kind of got everybody's attention, and everyone got to see Billy's powerful spiritual abilities that night. And so for them it was also true, and this served as kind of a strong thing for most of them of what Billy was talking about, how you can really develop personal abilities through the use of the spirit. So they had a pretty good show on New Year's Eve. Well, I see we're about out of tape, and we're towards the end of Book 18 now. So I'll see you on the other side, and we'll take a trip to San Francisco in the future.